I think a lot of people now don't remember how people didn't listen to Canadian music. People didn't like Canadian music. And people just assumed, I'm talking about the youth, that if it was Canadian, it was not up to standard.
Internationally, in Canada, like there was a lot of sort of like FM rock, lover boy kind of stuff.
In the 80s, it was even worse than the same 50 people moving from show to show. It was more like the same 10 people moving from show to show.
By the time we get to the 1990s, that base is very, very strong.
And the music industry exploded in the 90s in Canada. Simply exploded.
So in high school, I just sort of fell into this group of kids, mods and rockers, all were all like mods and into like same sort of music. It's one of those things where like, yeah, we're all gonna be different by being the same, but it was kind of cool because you had your gang you were friends with.
Really what they were the kids that were into music that were sort of alternative music at the time.
We all drove scooters and went on scooter runs and listened to cool music. And I don't mean like scooters like the 50cc plastic thing. I mean like metal Vespas and Lambretta, which we would all tear apart and customize and rebuild the engines and bore them out and put in bigger carburetors and like race them and make them go faster.
It was crazy. It was kind of like a bunch of teenagers can afford 2 wheels with a motor, and then they're off.
The fashion, the culture, the hanging out, playing together and riding together. It was just really cool. Like, it really made you feel like you're a part of something.
There's a bit of independence there, and then we'd meet other kids from across town and put on a dance or go to other dances. I think that's where we cut our teeth trying to figure out how to rent a hall and get a DJ together and sound system and stuff like that. I've got it in my head that it was the summer of '91.
Our one friend, Dave Gage, he was like, do you know Sandy? I'm like, no, I don't know Sandy. He's like, well, you guys both play guitar, you listen to the exact same music, you both have scooters, you both dress the same, and blah, blah, blah.
I think we met in a pub, and then we're like, oh, you play guitar too?
He's like, we should start a band. I'm like, yeah, let's do it. And the next day, I think we practiced for the first time.
And Mark showed up on a scooter from Burlington to Stony Creek. So we got in a couple jams, or at least one before the end of the summer.
The two of us knew we wanted to stick together, and we practiced for, like, I don't know, about a year or so before we ever played.
We would plan during breaks at school to get together and write songs and jam.
The first show we played was at this warehouse on Sherman Street. The whole self-storage is where this guy was living that we knew, who was our drummer, Doug.
Our first show was a Christmas party, which started a long-lasting tradition.
I don't think we were really like anybody else, and I think that not many people liked that.
Went through a couple bass players, and through my brother, I found Gary McMaster, who we nicknamed Wool at some point.
There's Gary. Man, he rocks.
Not only was he a bass player, his mother was a Highland dance teacher and had a Highland dance studio where we could practice when she wasn't teaching.
I think probably right away, Gary kept saying, I know this drummer. He's away right now, he's traveling, he's coming back.
I was going on actually an archaeological dig.
We were hearing that this guy's on a dig, he's gonna come back. We're like, okay.
I always played drums. I played in a few bands in high school, whatever, and then I went away to school, so I went to London. We did parties you know, for a couple of years around campus. And that's how I met Gary. Gary was going to OE-Art in London, which is a great recording school. And he'd said, when we get back in September, we're gonna start a band, man. I'm like, great, because like, you know, I don't have a job.
I remember specifically we were leaning on the counter in the kitchen, which had a window that overlooked the driveway. This Mazda like RX-7 or like little sports car pulls up.
He showed up with this tiny little jazz kit, and we didn't really play jazz in the truest sense.
And this guy gets out, he's wearing this pink and blue anorak.
He had this pink windbreaker, pink and blue or something.
I'm sure they told the story. I was in a pink coat and my dad's RX-7 and like whatever. I mean, it was the car that was available.
And his hair's like just like all long, and he's got these big eyeglasses. I just remember looking at Sandy and we both looked at each other, we're like, that guy's not fucking joining our band.
I instantly like would kind of like the guys. I always liked Gary, he was great, and Mark and Sandy seemed super cool.
I remember specifically, to this day, when he was playing and Gary was playing, and it was a song that he must have known. And me and Sandy looking at one another and going like, all right, he's okay.
That was actually my very first experience to like loud, shrill guitar playing, weird tunings. And I was like, this is like terrible, but cool, I love it.
That first time when he joined, it was kind of halfway through a bunch of songs that we'd written with other people, different versions of the band. And we were honestly trying to figure out how to write songs at the same time.
I guess Mark and Sandy liked me because it happened. I played the cassette on the way home, and I'm like, I totally want to do this. This seems like a new chapter, kind of fun, see where it goes.
Tim became the all-time drummer and has been with Mark and myself ever since.
It allowed us to like actually be a band that we thought would actually be good.
You know, there's this sort of mystery about having a record label and a record. And there was also radio show contests. And CFNY had this new talent search.
Where they would award people money to record a record or whatever it was. And we decided we would enter one year.
We wanted it to look as real as possible. And overnight, we put together this little package to submit.
Sandy made the box from scratch. Sandy made the album cover, sort of our single cover, and photocopied at Kinko's.
Full-on color, which was amazing at the time.
Branded like earplug packaging and branded some matches. And he'd arranged it all and like made like little X-Acto knife little cutouts for all the different pieces. The box opened up. You know, it looked pretty pro. Didn't sound as pro.
And we had a couple t-shirts and we put it together in a kit.
And it was the first ever physical thing that our label had ever created.
Trying to think up names, and it seems a little difficult.
He had a copy of Guitar Player magazine in his room. Kevin Shields from My Bloody Valentine was on the cover, and the byline was
Peeling Back the Layers of Kevin Shields' Sonic Unyon.
And we were like, that's the name. And he was like, what's the name?
We should draw an onion and make it Sonic. And like, okay. And I sent Mark up to the fridge.
I think there's a Spanish onion in the crisper, and there was. I took it downstairs, and he like literally sat down. He's a phenomenal artist. He's a great artist.
So I could like sketch it, and then we threw a ring around it and made it Sonic.
Well, the logo is the first thing I picture. It's like, psh.
I think of like the logo on all of the 7-inches and the compilations.
It's been the same logo for 25 years. Same name that people can't pronounce, which is great.
Sonic Unyon or Sonic Union, depending on who you were and how you wanted to pronounce that.
It talks about the many different bands that we kind of associated with and different layers of sound.
The name Onion is in your label. Although ours had murder, which was just stupid.
That was Andrew Scott's responsibility.
It seemed like in the early 90s, there was a lot of really cool music happening. And that's when I guess you could say that kind of a scene sort of started in the Hamilton area.
I think what we ended up figuring out was we were attracted to other bands that seemed to be trying to do the same thing and just make something happen, right? And that's how we ran into bands like Gleat at the time. They turned into Science-Spheric.
We got a chance to play, I think it was by circumstance, we got to play a show at the Corktown in Hamilton with the Sonic Unyon guys, with Tristan. And right after that show, we chatted with Mark, and he was immediately like, we're starting this label. Would you guys be interested in kind of being part of it?
Gleat was the one band that I really loved watching play. They were so like compelling to listen to and watch. And they were like nothing I'd ever really heard. And the people that went to go see that band were like, they were into it. It was awesome. And it was around the same time that the people who were coming to see our band were into it. But it was different people.
You'd hear about the dog-eat-dog kind of mentality of music, but it was never that way. It was everybody working together, trying to make sure whoever could succeed would succeed.
I remember going to see Shallow, for Shallow, North Dakota eventually, and seeing the people that were into that, and like seeing Tony Jacome just screaming behind his drum kit and thinking, like, what the fuck is that?
So tough. So it's just like, all right, we are really getting somewhere here.
And I always loved playing with Shallow in particular, right? Because it was the two extremes where we would have, you know, we could have the quietest of quiet songs and they would have the heaviest of heavy songs, and we could each kind of play something in between. But anyway, that was always, something that I just loved.
There was a band called Sponge who became Smoother.
And they were more of a pop punk, like face-to-face kind of band. And again, different people going to that show.
And they were all different ages, all different sounds, and it was kind of an interesting experiment, a nice happy accident that we started booking shows together.
Clearly, everyone who's going to see all these bands love music and love these bands that they're seeing play. I like all of them. And I'm sure that given the chance, a Gleat fan is gonna like Shallow, or at least, you know, some of them will.
It was great to have people like-minded who wanted to support each other and bring each other up.
And maybe sharing this fans who appreciated just people trying to play live music, and then for all ages as well. That was another part of it that attracted each of us to each other.
Back then it was kind of lawless and there weren't really any rules, and it was just this really cool punk rock do-it-yourself ethic.
Okay, here we go. Tristan Sionic will be playing here. Rock. They will rock. Mark's contemplating suicide. Jump! Jump set. Look at those stacks. No, I didn't really say it. Ever see those like animal videos where you see one of the lions in the brush? This is what it kind of looks like here. Not like he's hiding from the crowd. What a stud.
It was just a good time to try to get as many people out to an event and have fun and hear music and do it all on our own terms.
So we started doing these shows where those four bands in particular would play together. And those four bands do not sound the same or look the same, but we did it, and like, I remember we did it at the Corktown a couple times, and it was out of hand. Like, it was just like so many people came. And I think that was the sort of start of that whole sort of scene.
Yeah, and it was all Hamilton area, and then, you know, eventually we had other cities that we were tapped into, like Toronto, of course, was the center of the universe for a lot of people, but we liked being in Hamilton and rooted in our town and our city.
It's a place you didn't want to live. Downtown was a place you didn't want to be. And yet here are these bands, and Dr. Discus' store were really still championing the city. It's just no one was really listening.
And it was just sort of a community of like-minded people, and it was like sort of 1993, 1994 era indie rock.
The enthusiasm of the scene then, I had no idea. Like, I had seen it at that first Gorp show I saw, but then this No Rules Cafe place right on Brain Street in Burlington was packed with like at least 100 kids dancing, moshing. These are my people.
We graduated high school basically and hit the road. Showed up in Hamilton and met the Sonic Unyon guys, Tristan Sionic and stuff. And then we started playing shows together.
When we came to Hamilton first, we played.
And I think Tristan Sionic played on the bill, didn't
yeah,
he?
it was mayhem. It was crazy.
It was packed, and there were people stage diving, flying everywhere. The stage collapsed.
It was incredible. I mean, these shows were packed. We're talking like anywhere between 100 and 400 people just soaking up the music, and it was just such a great time.
There was a lot going on, and we were playing all the time, right? And bands were coming to Halifax. We were playing all these great shows. There was great shows happening here in Southern Ontario.
It was a lot of setting up your own shows and playing for $50, and it's 6 bands.
It gives young people something to do other than like math.
It was good because so many people would come to see those bands. It was bad because other bands felt left out. That was never by design or intentional, but like we'd be all sharing our fans, and that's what a scene is. And as much as a scene is kind of cool, people were not into the fact that Sonic Unyon bands were becoming like a sort of a clique.
When you're sort of waving your magic wand, there comes in your town, and I'm sure that these guys experienced it, where it's like you can't put out everybody's band, and so then you're the bad guy in the eyes of some.
And it was the first time that people started to shit on us. And like, it was the first time we realized that when you do good at something, people don't like it. And it was the first time we all agreed, we don't give a shit. We're just gonna keep going on, because like, if we ever stopped doing what we're doing because someone was upset because we were doing better than them, we would never be doing what we're doing now.
There was a lot of excitement in like 93, 94, right? A lot of bands, like a full court press.
And there was a period of time in the 90s where it seemed that every single week brought a new band, a new artist, a new song, a new album, a new scene, a new sound. And while some of them did come from the major label world, more and more of them came from the indie side of things.
When they officially were like, yeah, you're in the band and let's try and do this, wasn't soon after, like I was like, what do I have to do to buy into the company? Because I want to do this.
I think he understood why we put the energy into what we were doing and thought it looked like a great thing to be part of.
Sandy and I have each put in $2,000 of our own money. Like, if you want in, you got to put up $2,000 too.
So I asked my dad for the money, and you know, they loaned me the money. My parents loaned me money so I could buy into the company.
And his dad thought he was out of his mind. He's like, that's crazy. I'm never going to see this money again.
So no, that was good, and we needed more because it was a lot of hands-on, right? And we had sort of made a few goals to release a record for each of us. And thankfully, our friends were on board with the idea.
We had an all bands meeting. It was the 4 bands at the time, and Mark and Tim brought out Missive by Steve Albini saying, you're not going to make any money. You have to be in it for the right reasons. You have to want to do it. You have to love to do it. You have to work hard, or else you're not going to get anything out of it. And that was a call to arms, I suppose. It's just like, let's get to work.
Yeah, this new thing, double cassette recorder, and both sides record at the same time. We had something with the master on it. Mark bought one of these players, and I bought one. I'm making Tristan Psionic tapes, sponge tapes, Gleek tapes, shallow tapes.
Our office was at my parents' place. We would all sit around and fold cassette covers and cassette stickers on, stuff them in, box them up.
It was like Shallow doing it, us doing it, the Smoother guys doing it, the Cyan guys, Gleek guys doing it. We were all helping one another.
And it was cassette time. We couldn't afford CDs. They were very expensive.
Get all the t-shirts and fold them up and put them all in the boxes. Then we'd all go to our shows and we'd all sell merch at shows and distribute them the old-fashioned way, which was kind of cool.
I remember sitting at the Corktown, like making the tapes before the show for Shallow, right? Like the release show, we were like still like cutting them on like with X-Acto knives.
We had this great hookup at the Kinko's. We went there, and the guy would let us at night, and when there was no one around, he would let us just experiment with stuff.
It helped make the label profitable maybe a little back in the early days.
We were basically mocking up, before computer graphic design, posters and album covers and things, and just changing things on the fly. And
we'd literally like print at Kinko's at a reduced rate, hundreds and hundreds of posters. And like they'd be on every pole.
We would ride skateboards down, all the way down King Street and all the way back down Main Street, just to like get posters put up.
It really was a collective work. It was super rewarding.
We do all the polls around every high school, so we get all the high school kids out to the shows, and that's what built our fan base.
Almost all of this we're talking about has its roots in punk rock ethics. Those artists were DIY, their relationship with the audience was DIY, the audience valued DIY, and I think that's why it felt the way it felt. It felt like you were a part of something.
The whole process, and being part of the whole process, was big. It was major. It was part of the Sonic Unyon character for sure.
Everyone did their bit for their band. It was like we're a gang. It was pretty cool. Yeah. Good gang.
Some say I'm so laid back that it wouldn't be too hard to fake that I was dead. No, there's nothing wrong with me.
I guess the first band I ever heard from that stable was Tristan Psionic. I thought, okay, this is a really interesting band doing some really cool shoegazy stuff. Why aren't more people hearing about them?
1993, I believe, I was working for EMI Records at the time, doing A&R. I was a scout. I recall this clunky old van pulling up with these guys in it, and they're like, hey, how's it going? It was like CMW or something like that. I do recall them driving me home and in that van and getting a bag of like cassettes and like promo photocopies and and all that.
Later you find out that it's the guys, behind the label, and it's carried on a tradition that you saw with Epitaph and all these other labels that were created by the band members because nobody else would pay attention to them.
People would hear about the idea of, say, our band having a record label or Sonic Unyon or something. They would just be excited by the notion like, oh, you can do that? I'm going to do that in my community.
It was a mail system of like, here's a cassette of some stuff. It was like a broken telephone of music, and then they would get their friends on the show, and they would be good shows.
We used to trade tapes. I think that was a really important part of building those neural pathways where your relationship with music was actually physical, to understand what it's like when you scratch a record and go, fuck.
Everyone wanted to put out a CD then. No one had a CD. I'm like, well, I can put a CD together. If you give me your $50 now, you will prepay for like an excessive amount of CDs at a really cheap price. Like we'll get it all done. Just give us a song, and like when it's done, we'll give you, boxes of records or whatever it was. And so a bunch of us did that, and then we raised the rest of the money ourselves.
And at the same time, vinyl was still kicking around, and we had an attachment to it because we grew up with it. So we put out a 7-inch first. The first 4 bands on the label are on that. The 7-inch was Smell You Later. The CD was Not If I Smell You First.
Those first compilations kind of cemented us as an actual label.
To go from photocopying posters and album covers and cutting and pasting to sending some crazy artwork you did in Microsoft Word, and then getting a box full of CDs was pretty nuts.
And then we did our first ad in Exclaim, did a half-page black and white ad for those 2 records. So it was like our first advertisement. I think we were trying to put out there that like, okay, we're putting our hand up, we're gonna try this too.
The other reason we're up here is we're stalling. So are you guys ready back there? All right.
Gleat was becoming a quick favorite.
Most excellent band.
And when we'd go on tour, eventually we'd always get asked about them.
Their band was really good. He was like such an amazing presence on stage.
Scott really did have a lot of unique energy to him and passion that he brought to what he did and on stage and off the stage, and just genuine guy.
That's the birthday boy.
That's the birthday boy.
Fucking right.
Now me and Cruzy have grown together as brothers because we both had the same realization that we never fit in anywhere that we ever were. Now we move into Warwick Court, we build this beautiful house, we meet all these beautiful people, but the best thing of all is that we all play music together. That's how we met most of our friends. But I just like to say that Steve Cruzy's 22 now, and I'll give his eulogy when he's 102, and I hope we all see you there to see it. Okay, thank you. Happy birthday, Cruzy!
There was something about him. He was a weird little dude, but he had this presence. Anybody who met him like felt it. It was super. It was weird. It came from the heart. He like really wanted to, and he, again, bring people together. And he had a passion for music, and he had a passion for art and for poetry, and that kind of came through and really inspired people. And it was kind of something to behold for sure.
We had this New Year's Eve party on James Street North, and all the bands played, including Gleat. Just a good night, lots of friends of friends, music, all great, like a really good night.
Like once Gleat took the stage that night, it was like no one's out hanging out in the other room or whatever. It's like, everybody loved Gleat.
The next day, he and some friends were watching movies, and I think they're going from one person's house to another when they had a car accident and he died.
It was a hard one because I think I'm just trying to remember all the feelings that were going on, and we were all working well together and having some great shows and starting to put out music together, and to have an incident like that affect so many of us. It's a hard one to describe.
So remember Penny Dobson, who was friends of ours then and still is, coming in. I can't believe I do this. Sorry.
That was, it's hard to explain. I mean, that guy, he was something special.
We were like a gang, and he was like kind of probably the leader of the gang. He was the cool guy in the gang, that's for sure. And like everyone kind of looked at him like, I don't know what it was. There's something about that guy that was just like, how he had this kind of aura about him.
Death is hard for anyone to come to grips with when it's close friends or family.
When you're younger, you make friends faster and like you form bonds faster.
To properly explain him, how awesome he is, it is more than words can say. So all I can say is I dub him the maestro, and he knows who he is. We had some of the deepest talks, so.
That was pretty major. So that camaraderie, that family feeling was genuine. And these guys were like hugely supportive during that time.
And the band picked up their socks and reformed and started writing immediately.
We decided right then, after Scott had died, that we're like, yeah, we can't stop. Like, we got to keep doing this.
I started Science-Spheric out of that quite quickly. And I remember going to the first show and like, I remember seeing there's so many people there. It was awesome. They were so good.
The Science-Spheric early creations are still some of by far the best.
That record, Somnium, that there's a lot of feeling of loss in that record, which obviously naturally lost our best friend.
Tragedies can also make incredible music, unfortunately, that can happen. And I think that did happen there.
It's really just a matter of like a sort of a product of us jamming for about a year after Scott had died before we started recording.
Science-Spheric was kind of this, you know, how we talk about Godspeed now or how we talk about Arcade Fire now. For an underground crew, like Science-Spheric was the band, you know, that a lot of us really connected to.
Science-Spheric, I would look at the shirt that was at the back of Stink magazine and was just like, one day I will own that shirt.
I think it was really positive because I think it not only said to not just them, the guys in the band, that we can move forward, but I think to everyone that was, you know, involved with the label, or whether it was other bands or fans or friends, that like, you know what, life goes on.
You know, we were a young band at the time too. We had only been playing for not quite 2 years, so we still had that passion and we still wanted to keep playing music, and we loved that we had the camaraderie internally, just the band itself. We, I guess, felt like our work wasn't done.
Like, probably made one of the best records we ever put out. So at least, you know, at least there's that, I guess. I don't know. We'd promoted a couple Eric Tripp shows back in the day and become friends with them, and they said, we're going on tour, Western Canada, do you want to come? We're like, of course we do.
I was just about to finish a degree, a university degree, and I ended up skipping town. We didn't come off tour probably for 2 years, so.
We were like, oh, Eric Tripp, they were like this iconic East Coast band signed to Sub Pop. That first tour with Eric Tripp was like wicked, eye-opening experience.
We didn't want to leave town without having records to put in stores.
The Eric Tripp tour is cool because it was the first time it actually took us out of province. Like, all our shows had been in Southern Ontario. We're building this great vibe around Southern Ontario and this great fan base, and we saw the opportunity that this gave us to extend the fan base of our band, our label, and use it to its fullest extent.
It's not necessarily a vacation, although the first time was pretty magical, you know. The van shows up and throw everything in, and next stop is Winnipeg, you know, and it was like everything was new.
We were far more relentless on tour than I think most bands in terms of our workload. If we had a day off, we would spend the whole day at a payphone.
Oh, it was go time every day. Like, I mean, we had lots of energy back then and we were very motivated and had this opportunity and we weren't gonna let it go past us.
Because we were just kind of setting up our knowledge and networks, right? And just fumbling through the dark across Canada.
They were one of the few ones that had the foresight, I guess, to forge those relationships for themselves as a band and as a community of people and help their community and get it out across Canada.
We meticulously kept notes on everything from the promoter to who owned the store and who was the buyer of certain kinds of music at each store. What DJ played what at CKLN or at whatever station across the country. Even if it didn't help us, we knew it would help another band on the label.
Playing shows, getting in the van, driving to the next city, waking up in the next city a lot of times because Sandy had to get, and Mark had to get to an interview, and I was going to go to record stores and drop off consignment product.
We kept them stacks of these receipt books. And that's how we kept track of our sales, because no one would buy them from us. We're like, oh, we're not gonna, who are you? We're not gonna buy these. We'll put them in our store. And maybe one day you'll come back. And we're like, oh no, we'll be back. And they go, well, when? I'm like, next tour, we'll be back.
It set a great tone, right? Because people were like, man, these guys, they're working in the van, they're working when they get to cities, they're working when they are on stage. When did they sleep?
They're potentially the hardest working people I've ever had the pleasure to meet. They are kind of ridiculous.
I know that they worked their asses off and drove to all those places and did it themselves, and all that kind of nickel and dime accounting of you owe us $13. Okay, don't make me drive 500 miles to come and get that again.
At some point, Tim and I figured out that we'd been to almost every record store in the country, except for a handful that were owned and then really far off places. But hundreds of record stores.
We stopped at all the record stores, and we stopped at as many radio stations as we could, and eventually we got to know a lot of people that way.
Probably one of the biggest things we did is we made relationships with all of the people that ran or owned or worked at all the independent record shops across the country.
We also knew that all the cool people worked at record stores. That's where you found the tastemakers of the day, right?
They were effective in getting records into all these mom and pops across Canada because they had a really good relationship with them. Well, those mom and pops are still out there. They still exist, and there's the same record stores across Canada. And the big chains, I won't mention the names, they don't exist anymore.
Trying to figure out how we were going to get to the point where we could pay staff, pay ourselves, have a legit company. That was obviously important because none of us wanted to continue on with our crappy part-time jobs.
It was a great experience to grow up and try that stuff out, and wouldn't trade it for anything, really.
We mailed a lot of records out, and we called everyone and we followed up with everybody. We just figured it out, every single piece of the job.
There was no internet in the way we know it today, and there was no instruction manual, and there was no people writing blogs about how to do this and how to do that. We'd make 20 tapes and we'd sell 20, and we'd make 40 tapes and then we'd sell 40. So it was a gradual, careful growth.
Things aren't going to go smoothly, so don't even expect it. There are going to be bumps when you go down this path, but roll with the punches.
Anybody can have a label. You could start a record company tomorrow and put a record out for your cousin or whatever, right? You could say that, but it's backing up what you're doing, and I guess that was important. For us, it was well, if we're gonna do this, let's figure out how to do it properly.
I think it doesn't make any sense to start a record label at any point in history, right?
It's one thing to have the infrastructure of a record label, the office, the computer, the warehousing, and whatever else you may need. But it's all about relationships. It's not just relationships with the people that you will be doing business with, but it's the relationships that you have with your artists. And if you truly believe in your artists and give them what they need, they will give you what you need in return.
The bands that we wanted to work with were bands that we'd meet playing and putting a lot of effort and believing in themselves. So that went a long way. And when we showed interest, or they showed interest in us, it was a mutual spark that just fueled each of us.
Well, I remember listening to Rock Hits, the original sampler. It opened my mind too, because I wouldn't have been accepting of a band like Kittens probably if it was just thrown at me. But when it's part of this package with all these other artists, you open your mind a little bit and think, this is amazing.
In the 90s, we had this attitude I know what you want us to do, we're not gonna do that. I don't know why. It's almost like when someone tells you to do something, we have the reaction of well, we're gonna do it differently just because you told us to do it this way. Luckily enough, for 9 times out of 10, it seems to work.
One of the bands that we did play in regular rotation on the radio was stuff from Hayden, and he came really out of nowhere and had this rabid sort of fan base.
I don't think you can give Hayden enough credit.
We're like blown away by like how heavy he sounded for one person with an acoustic guitar.
It was jaw-dropping. It was just like, this guy is on stage with an acoustic guitar, but it's not acoustic guitar songs.
Everything I Long For was sort of a mixed bag of 2 versions of a cassette that I had released, which were all 4-track recordings that I had done at home by myself.
We're fans of all kinds of music, but I wouldn't say that top of my list is like people playing acoustic guitar and singing. It's just like not generally my thing, but like he was different.
In the way that Shallow would melt your face, in very super loud and super solid and super specific about how they were playing. Hayden was equally strong and specific, but it was just him with an acoustic guitar, which didn't sound thin and light.
It was heavy, it was weird. I mean, just his powerful playing, I guess, is a big part of it and everything, but yeah, he was a remarkable player for sure.
Everyone wanted to play with him because everyone wanted to watch him play. Everyone wanted to learn from what he was doing. Like, how can I be as powerful as a whole band with just me? It's like probably you can't. He can, but probably you can't.
I really think that because I always played on nights when there were bands, I was sandwiched between like a band like Kittens, Tristan Sion. It really helped me come across to the listeners because it was different. I always got the sound person to make me louder. I played louder and I sang louder, and I tried to be very dynamic.
You have a room full of kids screaming and drinking or whatever it is, and whatever the noise is, whatever it is that's going on, when he gets up there and hits that first note and lets out that first like tone from his voice, it's like silence.
And the engagement between this artist and fan is really, really strong.
Hayden was pulling his influences from what was current at the time.
It was a series of shows where kids were sitting cross-legged on disgusting damp carpets. You know, I actually feel bad about it now.
He could connect with everyone that was in the room.
A couple years ago, I did some 20th anniversary reissues, and I looked back on some mail that I received back then, and looking at it from a different way, it was really interesting to see just how much I connected with some kids at the time. It's pretty amazing, actually.
We love Hayden. What do you have there? I've got Hayden's, okay, I have the words to the songs, and I have little notes he has, like, fuck winter, and stuff like that, and everything that he's having here, and I'm in shock.
He blew up huge nationally, disappeared on all sorts of huge tours with Weezer and all this stuff, and so his album was just flying through the door. Like they couldn't even keep up, but they did.
We still, to this day, have that record in our catalog. He let us keep that record for over 2 decades, and he gave us a gold record for it last year, finally. Finally got to 50,000 copies, just took 2 decades.
Network Records has Sarah McLachlan, and Sonic Unyon has Hayden. You know, we got one, sweet. I mean, that's my silly take on it anyway.
I was at this Music Cities conference the other day in Vancouver, and they asked us about how we do things in Hamilton in terms of what we do as a company. And what is true now is true then. And what I said was, we kind of do shit now and apologize and plead ignorance later. The first will suck. That was the first prime example of that.
We just wanted to live our dreams. Wouldn't it be great if we like played an outdoor show on a stage, like a festival stage?
This was just like one of those ideas like, yeah, let's do that. That's cool. Like build a stage in a farm field. Great.
A lot of times you see there's a mountain to climb and it's just like, oh God, I don't even know how to start. And they just start marching.
So we got a bunch of our friends' bands together and found a production team that would build a stage for us in the field, and just we went for it.
The first one, I was on acid in a tent, I was scared to come out.
Called it Wool Sock, and we used wool, our bass player, as the logo, his head, and it was like on a sock. I don't know.
It was the same thing going back to the scooter rallies, word of mouth. Like, people just showed up.
The weather was horrifying.
At the time it was about to kick off, the craziest thunderstorm started rolling in. The sky turned absolutely black, like tornado black.
And then all of a sudden, like, torrential downpour.
I was holding onto the tarp at the front of the stage because it was blowing off because of the thunderstorm that was coming. And I actually got lifted off the stage. There was that much wind.
We were all on each corner of the stage, like holding tarps down, like as bands were playing, and Gary did acid.
He was on fire. He claimed he could see right through his hand.
Yeah, I can see through my hands, man.
I can see through my hands.
The show goes on, and it was madness. It was fun.
Change of Heart, like, were amazing. Shallow, North Dakota, were so loud. I remember there's a photo of me and Sandy standing with our ears covered like this, watching.
We had a good time.
It was a great event. It was probably like one of the best events we ever did. Totally illegal, totally not in conformance with any kind of bylaw or any kind of regulation of any department of any city in North America. You know, that's what you do when you're that age. You just kind of like figure shit out.
The next year, word had spread, and we wanted to do another one in a different spot and get a proper stage, and things just kept escalating.
Woolstock 95 was the year the kids who didn't know what they were doing, who were messing around putting on a show in a field, got their hands slapped for not growing up and behaving like responsible adults.
That was our first big experiences with don't trust anybody.
They trusted someone to get permits for this huge outdoor festival, and the guy didn't get permits, and it just got on the radar as far as the cops and the fire is concerned.
Basically, the guy that owned the land was like, well, it's private property, I can do whatever I want, and that didn't fly. They were like, no, you can't do whatever you want because it looks like you're gonna have 10,000 people there.
I remember Tim really trying hard to work with the authorities having jurisdiction, right?
They'd invested tens of thousands of dollars, pre-sold tickets, and what are they gonna do the day of? They don't have the huge outdoor space that they'd promised people who bought tickets.
I was on the phone with the judge and basically just got ripped. Like, you stupid kid. Why do you think you could do this? And why do you think you could have done this without getting all these approvals? This thing is shut down, it's over, right? And we're like, oh God.
He was on one line with the judge, and I was on the other line with Kim Hughes from CFNY saying, can you please let everyone know that our event has moved?
We ended up having to move it inside just to save the show, and because there was a lot of bands sort of organized and scheduled.
Within several hours, venues had opened up for them to host these bands back in Hamilton to make at least the ticket holders somewhat satisfied.
It was still a great day and a good show. And yeah, we've figured out that that's not how to do an event.
It's cool to hear about, I think it was Woolsock and some of the events that they did, that they actually did festival type events that long ago.
Live has always been a critical part of what we've done, but those early days of making those early mistakes were actually really, really smart and important and small scale, in the big scheme of things, so there wasn't a lot of money lost, but lots of really valuable lessons learned.
I don't know if we ever did Woolsock again.
Well, their annual Woolsock concert may have been thwarted by the Fun Police this year, but the Sonic Unyon record label survived and threw a bigger and better party instead. This past weekend, the Hamilton-based label celebrated their second anniversary by heading out to sea.
The second anniversary, we're like, we gotta do something that tops that crazy show we did all together. And so we're like, let's do a boat.
You know, I can't remember who spurred the idea.
It's another one of his classic Sonic Unyon moments where Tim decides we're gonna do a show in a boat. I'm like, okay, how much does that cost?
Oh, maybe I did. I don't know. I like to come up with stupid ideas that lose us money sometimes.
And he tells me, I'm like, oh, that's all the money we have, all of it.
Which seemed at the time like a good idea.
This is not a good idea.
And it was, I think, a novel idea at the time.
So we rented the Captain Flinders in Toronto Harbor.
Put the tickets on sale. And they were a little light, sales were not, they were okay, but not great. And we're like, we gotta sell every ticket to get our money back so that we don't lose money. We started calling every single person we knew in Toronto, any industry person from anywhere. We're like, we have got to sell 550 tickets, do or die here. We won't be a label tomorrow if we don't.
We had family members and friends, and then we just packed this boat.
Had food and drink, and like just had a party, basically out on the water.
And some of the people we invited, like I remember Xan, maybe, some of the Much Music people, you know, and they brought their cameras, and that was just like, blew our minds.
Why on a boat? Oh, why on a boat? Because we had so much trouble putting on the last show we tried to pull off on land.
So we got Our Cheerleader, Huevos Rancheros.
Oh, I think we wanted the night off. That was it. We wanted to pick some bands to play, and we're just gonna chill out and party.
A little bit of a legendary thing. I don't think anybody else has done that. I want to recreate it. So I'm having a debate with Mark about recreating that. Now that we have the money, he doesn't want to spend it. Back when we had no money, it seemed okay. I guess it was like a all or nothing situation.
The best part of that thing is that we were interviewed on the boat, and Wool claimed,
We're not gonna play music anymore, we're just gonna throw parties.
that's kind of what we do now, kind of just throw parties. We put out records too, but yeah, it's like he saw into the future right through his hand.
They signed this band from Sault Ste. Marie called NC-17. That worked. They moved down to Toronto and everyone just like, yeah, this is the new band, you know, and they broke nationally too.
Face painted cigarette white. You asked the cleanest boy you found.
We played with them enough that we thought they were making interesting and different music, and they were good guys.
When Red blew up, we were like, what is this? You know, because it was a beautiful song.
Bill wrote that song as a wedding gift to a friend. So it was truly an authentic song.
They wanted to do a big splash, but then we brought a real contract, right? Because they hadn't signed a fucking contract, so we wanted to sign it.
Yeah, that was our sort of like doing a big press release, signing Treble Charger.
They want to do a contract signing? We'll give them a contract signing. We figured out fairly early on, like in the relationship, that they weren't going to be on Sonic Unyon forever. It was going to kind of be a thing where we put, you know, a record or two out for them and they'd go and sign to a major.
They wanted to be on the radio and a lot more directly than maybe the other groups wanted to figure that out.
I think they always wanted to go in that direction.
I think they made quite a good go of it for a while, so that's great. And then that was the goal, I think, for all of us, is to make a living in this music industry, whatever it was.
The influence of Much Music cannot be understated.
Much Music and programming like The Wedge introduced people to new music. I mean, it was a lifeline.
Much Music was definitely a lot about music back then, and it was amazing that they would have a show that would play new or rarely heard stuff. And even more amazing probably to get on it.
I don't like what you're gonna do.
If you made a video, they would play it. You might not get heavy rotation, but you could get seen. Much Music would broadcast it across the country.
And all of a sudden, a kid in St. John's, Newfoundland, can hear and enjoy the same sort of stuff the kids in the urban centers, like Toronto and Vancouver, are enjoying. Same thing with the kid in Yellowknife.
Much Music was connecting the scene nationally, so we would go to Saskatoon and play to a few hundred people, like, pretty quickly out of the gate. We basically opened for Sloan, and then after that, we could show up and do our own shows. There was just that buzz. And French Inhale, that video, got some attention. Much Music really did play that quite a bit, so that made a huge difference.
Well, Much was like the key ingredient in whether or not people thought you were going to be able to like sell a decent amount of records in Canada.
If you play one of these videos in regular rotation, you have immediate national coverage, and that spurred record sales, radio airplay, concert ticket sales, and it also helped create this sense of musical nationalism.
They at least gave you that glimmer of hope that if you got that type of rotation there, you could become a much bigger band.
And it was just as simple as this, man. We loved music. Like, we gave a shit about it.
People that were fans of what we were doing and showed their support by playing our videos and having our bands play live.
We took it really seriously. People fought for bands. Like, every single one of us on the air, music was our core. We just gave a shit. We also knew it was important. We knew it was important to represent our own community. and we did that.
Hey folks, Sicky and Lee here in exotic Hamilton, Ontario, known for its big-ass steel mill, its $40 a month parking lot, its comedians, it's rock and roll. We're here to talk with the owners and operators of Canadian stalwart indie label Sonic Unyon.
The sort of alternative videos used to be like a Friday night at 1 a.m. kind of thing, and then The Wedge turned into like an after-school television program. It was on every day at like 4 o'clock. That really sort of spread the word.
These videos kept showing up with these bands that seemed more interesting than a lot of what was being played. And you'd look down at the bottom and you'd see Sonic Unyon records.
We were able to have some success because there were grants to get videos made.
We worked with some really cool video makers to like make some really cool videos early on. And most of them stand the test of time. Tricky Woo had like great videos, like amazing videos. Treble chargers are really polished. Hayden's are great.
The first or second one I did was for a song of mine called Bad As They Seem. We set the stage up to look like I was playing in my bedroom, and then it goes out and shows a crowd in my bedroom. That was a Video Fact video, and that was a very important aspect of helping me become known to a lot of people. I mean, a lot of people would recognize me on the street all over Canada from how much music supported that video.
We all had videos. We had cheap videos, we had expensive videos, and they all got played. It really helped each of those bands grow their fan base and the label grow its fan base too. Our band even played live on The Wedge. We got on there and played an instrumental song because that's what we do. They're like, probably not the best song to play. We're like, yeah, we're not that smart.
By the time we came in sort of in the second half of the 90s, Shallow and Sponge and Science-Spheric, the original lineup, you know, was still pretty well intact, and their own success. Tristan Psionic weren't doing too bad themselves. They're packing them in, they're touring Canada. They were growing at a mile a minute.
I was huge into New Grand, actually. I loved those guys, man. The pop, they had Sloan tunefulness thing going on for sure.
I loved Chore. So when Chore was happening, I loved Chore.
Any kid in an indie rock band in the first half of the 90s, that was the dream. That was the rock star dream. What can we do? Can we get on Sonic Unyon? And the fact that we did that, we didn't take it for granted.
I was listening to that music, and I thought, this is a cool band, man. This is a really cool band. And then you start to take a look at all the bands that they have, and you think, that's a really good label. That's a label that can be proud of their discography.
I feel like we were the beginning of the second wave. It's like Chore, The Dinner Is Ruined. Their first release with them was coming out right alongside ours, I think.
I kind of feel like the next really cool wave of stuff we were doing was we did Clayton Park by Thrush Hermit.
And what was so great about when we landed that record with them was they were so excited about it. We were excited about it. We felt like it was the best record we made. I think we kind of hit our stride there. They put it out and they were really enthusiastic, and it was the polar opposite of our experience with Elektra. Not to say that we didn't have good people there who liked what we did. There were some really great people at Elektra, but the machine was not really working for us.
Probably the best record we put out, like to this day. Phenomenal, like just a great record.
I'm glad that our last record came in under a Canadian umbrella and was shepherded through that landscape by like friends and people that we admired and had a lot of respect for, and felt that the feeling was mutual.
If Tricky Woo were around when the Strokes broke, it would have been a different story, I think. You know, same for Mooney Suzuki. Coolest New York garage band, like awesome dudes, played super hard. They were phenomenal to watch. That was probably one of my favorite periods in our history. Danko Jones, the first record. I remember like seeing them play in Halifax and Rishi getting on stage and like just like taking like a gallon of milk and like pouring it all over his face and then just like play. It was just like, you know, phenomenal, like good times.
We're like, okay, gotta get out of Mark's parents' basement. We rented one room and then we outgrew that. We rented another room and then I think another room.
So one day, just by a stroke of luck, Ron Weston Sr., who owned Sam Manson Sports here in Hamilton and had a 12,000-foot building sitting vacant for the last 3 years, went next door to that building to Dr. Disc and found Mark Furukawa and said,
"Hey, my name's Ron. I'm just gonna offer you the best deal you've ever had in your life."
We're like, we can't afford a building. We can't afford to pay ourselves. We can't afford a building.
He's like, just try it out. And then if you guys like it, then you can buy it from me and we'll like work out a deal.
We're like, free for a year? He's like, yeah. So we took him up on that offer. We moved in, and after a year, we managed to find a way to work out a deal and buy it.
Even though it was a small amount of money, it was still a huge stretch for us to do it.
And we cobbled, borrowed, stole the money to get it together, buy the building.
Downtown was abandoned. There was no one down here. There was no coffee shops. There was no one to have coffee with.
At that point in time, downtown Hamilton was pretty sketch. Probably the worst time it's ever been.
Here's what Hamilton's famous for, garbage, and lots of it. And the smell, but we don't have odophonics yet.
I wouldn't say it was an unsafe place, but it just had this really negative image.
It was like boarded up shops, some social clubs, and a few old businesses that had hung on through the harder times.
And that was the start of it, because nobody was buying property down here, and he didn't want to haggle. He just like, here, take it or leave it, and we took it.
Tim, here to tape some of the show.
When Cargo Records went out of business, and when we managed to pick up all those labels for distribution, it was a great feeling in terms of validation. They were trusting a label that wasn't yet a distributor to distribute their records. And it was cool to feel legitimized by labels that we looked up to.
Fluffy was our guy there, and he called us and he's like, I really think you guys should come to Montreal. We're like, yeah? He's like, oh yeah, totally. Definitely should come like this weekend. And we're like, okay. So we drove to Montreal, and when we got there, he's like, this place is going down. And we're like, oh my God, load the van. So we loaded as much stock as we could take with us. And then, literally a month or two later, Cargo was bankrupt.
As we're putting together this list of record stores that we dealt with, and figuring out that the more stuff we could have to offer them, the more they'd listen or take our phone calls.
Who are all Cargo's top labels? Who are the labels we really like?
Skiing Records in Minneapolis and Discord in Washington.
And we made a massive list, and it's like, call them. We were just getting on the phone with people we never talked to before, like calling Epitaph, cold calling them, like, we do distro. Can we do your distro? And they went for it, right? Like, it was like bonkers.
One by one, we added catalogs to our catalog, and we weren't just shipping 5 records to stores, we were shipping 50 records to stores.
Because we had this list of stores, and maybe the Americans didn't have that same list and the names of people.
And that's actually also not an easy business to be in, because the people that you're selling to, so the stores and stuff, they don't pay you for 90 days. But the people you're buying from, they want to be paid in 30 days.
I was at the Sonic Unyon office one day, and they're like, we actually don't have just a specialized sales guy right now, a sales rep for the distro company and the label. I need a day job because the band's still not, paying the bills. I'm working at Sonic Unyon.
Now we basically expanded the distribution company to a full-blown distribution company. We had 180 suppliers. We serviced 350 stores.
Our business went, I think, 10 times. I think we grew 10 times in 1 year, at least. We went from 100,000 plus in billing to over $1 million in billing, overnight. It was just boom.
We did in 1 month what we did in the previous year, and it scared the crap out of us.
I remember going down to that building on James Street, and they had a warehouse, and it wasn't really that different than going down to see what was going on at Southern or Touch and Go in Chicago.
By that point, we knew everybody at every record store. We had personal relationships with them. We trusted them, they trusted us.
When I was younger, seeing the cool vibe at the Sonic Unyon office, when we'd visit, I was like, oh, dream job. And I got it. I was the distro indie store sales guy for the better part of the next decade. And I loved it. It was great.
You fax things, and then you shrink wrap 1 million records, and you organize things, and you build shelves. Because it was all about distro. The whole time I was there was no record that came out.
You never heard anything bad about Sonic Unyon. You never heard that they didn't pay people, or they didn't pay bands, or they didn't pay labels or whatever. So, kudos to them, because that was a tough part of the business, 100%.
I like nothing more than seeing the sales sheet for No Effects So Long and Thanks for All the Shoes coming through my fax machine. I'm like, all right, we're selling No Effects. This is amazing. And we're selling Cyan Spheric right next to it. So now we're able to provide service for our bands and service for our labels together. And the strength in numbers. We've got a catalog of really great records. We can really do a good job for everybody if we work hard. And that's exactly what we did.
Part of the reason they were able to really move the business forward and move their label and distribution forward is they had this building they could custom tailor it exactly the way they wanted to. So when distribution exploded, they were able to like gut the bottom and then just change it all into distribution space to house CDs and records and whatnot.
It was sort of like a one-stop shop. There was people recording, people rehearsing, records being released, records being distributed, all in the one building. There was like 20 of us working in there at the time. We used the whole building. And we put on shows in there, like Alexis on Fire played on the 3rd floor.
600 plus kids jumping on the 3rd floor, and our office was on the 2nd floor, and my desk was right under the stage. And Mark, like, I'm getting out of here. The building is gonna collapse. You're gonna die. Everybody's gonna die. I'm like, no, man, it's totally holding. Everything's great. It was like, I'm staying right here until they play their last note, and then I'm gonna take the check up to Joel. And Mark's like, you're crazy. This is gonna cave in. I'm like, it's not gonna cave in. And it didn't cave in.
It was just like this crazy, insane building. None of that would happen in this city. Like, it would be shut down. There was no way. But no one was even looking back then. No one cared.
The kid that broke his leg, that all his friends told him to sue us. He's gonna sue you. We told him to sue you guys. And he was like being carried out like, this is the best show ever.
They've been the real catalyst on getting things done in spite of the municipal government, in spite of apathy, in spite of nobody else taking these risks.
Got us a great opportunity to be in real estate, and we got the bug. Once we had owned the property, we realized even though, you know, it is what it is, it's a huge asset to have. You know, maybe there's other opportunities, and at that time, everything was cheap.
We are now entering our, I guess it's 2 years old, our Sonic Unyon store, where we sell lots of independent records and CDs.
Here's how the record store really started. Oliver Newton, who owns O's Clothes in Hamilton, and at the time worked at Sonic's in Edmonton, called us up and said, you're gonna open a record store, I'm gonna run it. And we're like, I don't know about this. He's like, how many titles do you have in the warehouse? I'm like, I don't know, 30,000. He's like, just put one of each in the store. It's gonna be awesome. I'm gonna run it, it's gonna be great. He's like, okay, go find me an apartment. We'll be down in a couple months. So I did, I went apartment hunting for him. They moved here, we opened up the record store. He ran it.
I don't know if it made other record stores nervous in town, but at the same time, they didn't take all the stuff that we had. And I think it only helps when one great restaurant opens, another one, and another one. It creates sometimes a whole street.
We had our own clientele and sort of our own, I guess, music inventory and selection that we were known for. And they purposely didn't totally echo that. There was some overlap, but it wasn't that much.
The mom or dad would be like, do you have the new Shania Twain? It's like, no, but Mark does for sure. But we've got the new Melvins. You could try that. It's a little better than Shania.
I think Sonic Unyon Record Store had a great spot in Hamilton history.
There are a lot of things I don't remember in the history of everything that we've ever done together, but I specifically remember the day that I was at band practice. And me and Sadie were like noodling around and like not being very serious.
Every practice is kind of like that. Like the noodlers, the guitar players, my good friends. Fuck, they're so fucking annoying at times because they won't shut up and they're so fucking loud.
We were all trying to get ready to record a record before we went on tour. It'd been quite a while coming because we'd had like a almost 3-year break. And we're noodling around and Tim's like getting all frustrated. He's like, what are these guys doing?
And you just want to talk with the bass player and you can't have a conversation because these guys are like,
and he's getting more and more agitated, and finally he throws his drumsticks down. He's like, fuck, just get your shit together.
Yeah, I don't know if we could get our shit together at that point.
And he's like, I'm out of the fucking kid.
So that had been weighing on me for months, like I knew, and we hadn't told anybody. I had intended on doing it in a different way, but they were making so much noise and it was pissing me off. I was like, ah. So I lost my mind. I'm like, I'm having a baby.
You're having a kid? We're like,
And it got quiet really fast.
I know for me, I didn't maybe fully understand what a child might mean. I wasn't ready myself, so brave for Tim.
Having toured so much on the other records and having built such a business, the band couldn't do what it used to be able to do because we couldn't be away from the office as long as we had been before. So there's a lot of factors in there.
He's basically laid out, we're gonna write this record, get it released, go on tour all before my kid's born. We're like, well, how far along are we talking? Like, Marty's like 2 months pregnant. We're like, okay, we better work fast. Sandy and I sit across from each other in our office, and I could tell he wasn't losing interest, but I could tell his mind was elsewhere for a while.
Sandy always worked really hard but a little bit differently than Mark and I. He's like an all-nighter kind of guy, so he'd destroy himself for like a week, and then he'd be destroyed for for another week afterward.
We'd started distributing records. He kind of didn't really want to be in the distribution side of things, but he was doing like graphic design, had his own graphic design business on the side. We're like, okay, like we could all work on the label together, play in the band. But I could still tell there was something like not quite right, and I didn't know what it was.
I think we were sweating it out in the office so much that we didn't necessarily put the effort that we could have or needed to into the band, and rightfully so. We had dozens of other ones we were significantly responsible for helping with their goals and dreams too, right?
Sandy wanted more to do with the creative side, so he wanted to find an outlet for his creativity. We could tell that we figured something was going to happen at some point.
I think the simplest version was one, I had a pretty rough accident riding the scooters, actually. So a lot of time spent reflecting, and eventually probably the one that stuck in my mind was to maybe consider doing something else.
I remember one day he said, "You guys, come on upstairs." So we go upstairs on the 3rd floor, which at that time was completely vacant, and all the lights are off upstairs. And he flicks the switch, and he's built a 3D giant Sonic Unyon recording company sign, the one that's mounted on the front of our building, and it's all got lights under it. It's brand new, made out of plywood, hand cut. Me and Tim were like, whoa, whoa, what is going on here? This is amazing. And so basically he created that for us in the store, and he made it part of his portfolio for applying to be an architect.
I remember the day that I went up these huge wooden letters. I'm like, oh my God, what are these guys doing? The S is gonna come down and like chop somebody in half.
I just checked out a couple schools, just trying to figure out where my head was at or what it felt like, and it had to be something significant because I still loved what I was doing and what we had built. And it was a really hard decision. They accepted me to U of T at architecture school.
We didn't know he was applying to architecture school, or at least I didn't know. And then when he got in, told us in Windsor. I think it was in Windsor, of all places.
He's like, I'm gonna go back to school. And I think I'm done here. We're like, well, what are you taking? He's like, well, I'm gonna be an architect. Well, that's amazing. I think he thought we were gonna be mad or upset. I'm like, no, geez, you've been doing this for a long time with us. When we moved and fixed up the building that we're in now, we asked him to be the architect for the one part of it. That building that I was sitting in, Sandy was the architect for, which is kind of cool.
It was like 2001 or 2 sometime. I remember Mark Milne came down to the warehouse and told me, and I think my friend Oliver was there, sort of made this announcement like, we just had our biggest month ever of most items, shipped. That was a big moment. And it was right when Napster had just was in the news, freshly in the news, but InSync had also just shattered all-time sales records.
So I think it was 2005, iTunes is opening up. And I remember thinking, oh, cool, we'll go meet with them, it'll be cool, we're gonna start selling to iTunes Direct, and we're gonna stop distributing records because this is over.
What's different now about even in the mid-90s was the prospect of being a major label success. Even though you weren't chasing, it was still kind of there. Nobody deludes themselves anymore. You gotta be Kanye, you gotta be Kim, you gotta be Taylor Swift. There's 2 worlds, and there's almost no middle ground.
Every year we did distribution, there was a major bankruptcy in retail. We lost lots and lots of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars over the years. Pinned off, A&A Sounds, Sam, CD Plus twice, Sunrise. HMV we missed because we'd sold the distro, but you could see the writing on the wall there too.
It was a little scary because we were seeing other companies going out of business in the States quickly. We didn't feel like we were gonna go out of business. We had a really solid group of labels, our sales were great, and we're like, well, yeah, but it's time to open up a new chapter in what we're doing.
There's a lot of different eras of the business. I'm talking about distro being this whole building. They don't have a distribution company anymore. And that was the business for close to 10 years.
They were way ahead of the curve. They could foresee trends and foresee digital looming, way before the major labels even reacted to it or thought it was a threat or even a thing.
As the sort of bigger labels merge into smaller groups of major labels, they seem to be concentrating on more sort of the macro huge acts. And I think that leaves a lot of artists who were probably good sellers and good artists that had good or probably still do have great careers, sort of left by the wayside because maybe, you know, 20,000 units of something in Canada isn't worthwhile doing anymore. I don't know.
They've adapted over the years, and I think it's that ability to be flexible and recognize when you're doing something that is going to put you out of business.
You just knew the writing was on the wall for physical product, but they really were prescient in the sense that they didn't stick around too long with the physical distribution, and then they would have gone down in flames.
When Mark and I decided that, okay, distro's for sale, we knew we were going to have to lay a lot of people off, which was really hard. Like, you never like to do that.
I was there for 10 years, and then it's like, the industry was what it was. I'm so happy I stuck it out for the whole time. It was just a great office to be in. I made lots of lifelong friends, most of whom I don't see anymore because I'm living here in Toronto now.
I was working at EMI at the time, and I came in, I was like, you gotta sign this band, the Sadies. And they're like, no, we're signing a con like Crush. They're gonna sell 100,000 records. And I was like, what? It didn't make sense to me. But today, I'd like to say that the Sadies are still doing shows, and I'm sure people watching this are like, who's a con like Crush?
At the height of EMI, for example, only one of the major labels, where we were 368 people. When I left at the end of 2012, we were 52 people.
Since we've sold it, there's only really like maybe 3 distributors left. On the indie side in Canada, maybe 4. And there was, you know, whatever, over 10 of us.
Tim and Mark have sort of single-handedly built this monster called Supercrawl.
I went on holidays one year and I came back and Tim said, we're gonna do Supercrawl. My first question, like, as always, well, how are we gonna pay for it? Oh, it's gonna be fine. It's gonna pay for itself. I'm like,
that's why they mesh together so well, because Tim has the really big picture and then Mark works with the really big picture and kind of brings it to a point that's perfectly realistic that it ends up being so successful.
Supercrawl started for me, I remember being booked the first year in a tiny tent. It was raining so badly that somebody had to take a broomstick and like poke the water off the roof of the tent so it didn't come down on us.
Managing to get around 3,000 people downtown on that block of street was like, whoa. You know, we knew we had accomplished something pretty awesome.
The very first Supercrawl had just happened when I went in for my interview, so I had just missed that one, but I didn't really know much about that. My parents went.
At that point, things were changing. People had moved into the neighborhood. There was places to have coffee and stuff, and it was really cool. And we'd always said, we're from Hamilton. We're staying in Hamilton. We're staying downtown. We're not moving to Toronto, despite how many people ask us to move to Toronto.
That just wasn't happening. There's just no way. Like, we're too ingrained here.
They could have left for Toronto, especially in those early days, I imagine. There was probably a lot of pressure to do that. And they stayed here and they built something that is so community driven.
The impact that Supercrawl's had on the community and on the artists to know that they have a show coming up every year. You know, the buskers, they know that they can get in shit for busking every year at Supercrawl.
Everything on the street, art exhibits, stuff for the kids, all the stages that Sonic Unyon puts on for Supercrawl, it's all free. There's a lot of money and time. You know, as soon as the one's over, the next day, Tim's basically, you know, thinking of the next year.
That became kind of an obsession to some extent. We were gonna make this festival and we're gonna get people to come back downtown and see what's going on. We're still doing it, 10th year.
The year that we hit 150,000 people. I think everybody has that idea too, like it's a we thing. It's our city, it's Hamilton, you know, like that's what's making Toronto people think we're cool. Not that we care.
When I hear Sonic Unyon, I think Hamilton. Because that's where they've always been. I've worked in Hamilton, I've lived in Hamilton.
As all this was happening, you know, that whole Hamilton cool renaissance was happening. I feel like we were definitely one of the people or groups of people that were part of bringing it back on the map.
I can't speak to why they started Sonic Unyon, but I got the impression it was like, I mean, we're going to do this for Hamilton, or it became a way for them to build what they were doing on a local scene level. But at the same time, they were really great to other artists, us, the Super Friends, Jail, and stuff like that.
All of a sudden, Frank Black was in the city. It was like these world-class musicians were coming to the city because of Sonic Unyon.
Hamilton's always had a cool music scene that was there. Sometimes it goes underground, sometimes it pops back up again. Big artists, they're small artists. We have some of the biggest artists in the country now out of Hamilton, which is incredible.
They're associated with the place in the same way I get associated with Nova Scotia because I stuck it out there. And so I really relate to it in that regard, and that's why I kind of see a kinship, you know.
They put us on the map as far as being this relevant, active, innovative city that had to do with music.
Tara Lightfoot is killing it, and seeing how talented she is and getting her where she is right now, it's like they've really invested a lot of time and energy and money into it. So it's pretty cool.
I was like walking dogs, teaching music, getting drunk, having a great time, and they said, we want you to make a big record.
You look in the case of Tara Lightfoot with Sonic Unyon, and they really invested time and effort. They saw this jewel in the rough and let her come into her own.
Mark and Tim wanted to help me, as they do for so many people now. Like I've watched them turn around and help people because they believe in them so many times.
There is a lot going on in Hamilton. A lot comes out of Hamilton. A lot has always come out of Hamilton, and at the foundation of it all are labels like Sonic Unyon.
So in Canada, if you ask me, there's Murder Records we had in Halifax, there's Mint Records in Vancouver, and there's Sonic Unyon Records out of Hamilton.
I think Sonic Unyon's place in the Canadian music industry has always been under the radar, and maybe it's because the artist and the music seems to come before the name of the label.
We always feel like we're like the underdogs or something still, and I suppose that's just like a inherent indie rock thing, but I think there's something to that too. We'll never make it, but we'll have fun trying.
The stuff they'd signed to the label, you look at it, it's all over the board. But at the core of it, it's this carefully curated, orchestrated signings or releases of bands and labels that they love.
I think the thing that with us, as soon as something is working, it's like, that's great. I can't believe we did that. All that work paid off. But as soon as we're at that point where it's working, it's like, okay, so what are we doing next?
I think the reason why we've been able to stay business partners for so long is because we do things differently.
Anything that I'm good at, Tim is probably not good at, and anything that he's good at, I'm definitely not good at.
I tend to be the go out there talker guy, and he tends to be like the guy that's making sure that we're paying the bills. And we both have really great, unique ideas too, so like throwing all those things into the mix.
When I hear Sonic Unyon, I just think of Mark and Tim. I just think of two stand-up guys that work their butts off and have made a huge difference.
I remember respecting them quite a bit and looking up to their operation with a certain amount of awe.
Hindsight's always 20/20 or something. But I will say, just thinking back to them, you could tell they had their shit together, but also that they were lifers.
I see Tim more than I see my wife.
I legit probably spent more time with Mark in the last 25 years than I have with my wife.
They're the perfect opposite personalities of each other that just mesh together so well that they can see multiple sides of things.
I think that Mark and Tim are like their own little solar system.
Yeah, we've had some blowouts.
We argue like you wouldn't believe sometimes.
The fights have been like pretty awesome.
Well, I've only seen one of them throw a CD at the other's head once, so that's good.
I threw a CD at him once, he was super mad.
And I think that even though when we go off on one another, we're both gonna say sorry at the end of the day, it's kind of comforting to know. I never think either of us would push so far that the relationship would blow up. We're way too far in to stop now.
You have an idea or a dream and you can make it happen. And I think that's what we learned early on, and thankfully we had enough in us that just didn't listen to the naysayers or people that didn't think you could do something.
I always trusted Mark, I always trusted Sandy, and there's never, ever questioned that. So I think that's also pretty rare, really, in the big scheme of things.
That's the beautiful thing about those guys. You can always depend on them.
I still really respect them and count them among my closest friends and allies. They're just really, really decent, hardworking people, and their hearts are in the right place.
It's inspiring to me that you can play by your own rules, live in this ecosystem that doesn't want anybody playing by their own rules, and it worked.
I've always been proud of the association. I always thought it was very cool, very grassroots. These music lovers doing what they love and helping bands. It's a good thing.
It's almost like going home for music. Like, I entered this building, and the smell of this building, it's just like instantly like, yeah, I'm at Sonic Unyon. And it's a really good and inspirational sort of feeling.
I know there's a family bond between everyone still. Even if everyone's living all over the country now and has moved on from music or not, that's gonna stay with us. That's gonna stay with all of us for all of our lives. And I wouldn't change that for anything. What more do you want from a scene?
They're a big part of my success personally, honestly, because if it hadn't been for being in the band and being part of the Sonic Unyon label and everything else, I really wouldn't kind of be where I am now, is like personally fulfilled. I think they're a big part of that, and again, it's because of that sincerity they imbue in everything they do. It's heavy for sure.
It's something I've been quite proud of. There was a lot of energy and true feelings put into it. Not with a lot of planning, but invaluable lessons. Met a lot of people, did a lot of things, played a lot of music. Amazing experiences, amazing friends, really.
Never could have built this or done what we've done alone. Like, if I didn't have Mark as a partner, Sandy as a partner, I'd never gotten here. So that's pretty amazing too.
What it does mean for me, really, when it comes down to it, is being able to do what you want to do, living where you want to live. I don't think you could really ask for anything else. I mean, it's the best. We get to do cool stuff in the city we love. What else could you want to do? It's pretty cool.
Fondest Sonic Unyon memories for me.
I want to say congratulations. 25 years they've lasted. It's really impressive in this industry. It's insane. It's insane. 25 years. It makes me feel old.
It's been a crazy time knowing you guys, and there's been a lot of great music. And I'm super proud of all these guys. I've learned so much, and they've just been like family to me. And the whole Sonic Unyon team is just like my heart. So thank you. Cheers.
I was working in the record store in Victoria. I was buying records off of Sonic Unyon because they were a distribution company, and they mentioned the fact that they were opening a record store in Hamilton. And I said, well, I should run that record store. And they said, yeah, you should. And I did.
This is Lisa LaRocca. That's her actual name.
When did you learn my name?
I don't know, 12 months after you interned? I don't know. She's gonna inherit all of it. It's all hers, pretty much. If you want it.
Every record I made, I pitched to Sonic Unyon to release. And it hasn't worked out yet. I don't quite know why.
Footnote, it was the first label that Puff the Duke sent a demo to, and they rejected it, which was awesome. I have the email somewhere, the rejection email.
Yeah, I remember the first time that when we heard that Chor had been like sort of signed to Sonic Unyon, and I remember driving in our van. I was like, wow, that's really important. Thank you so much for like allowing a prick kid to be on your label.
I had the pleasure of working at Sonic Unyon in 2000 and 2001, and it was hands down the best job I've ever had.
I was around since day one. Tristan Psionic and Smoother and Shallow and all that. Without them, I think Hamilton music scene wouldn't be as what it is.
These guys who were just winging it, and they came along, they were getting national attention and signing all these great bands and raising all these local bands to an amazing level where everyone was seeing them across the country. The label had so many great bands, and anytime they'd come to Oshawa, I would go see any band that was on Sonic Unyon.
I'm just like, hey, that Brush Ribbon album was on Sonic Unyon. That Hayden album was on Sonic Unyon.
One night it was Tristan Psionic, Cyan Spheric, I believe Gorp was there too, in Shallow, North Dakota. It's the first time I saw Cyan and Shallow. I was not prepared for Shallow whatsoever. That was a fantastic night. Turned me into who I am today, for good or ill.
I'm Lee, I'm Mark's sister-in-law. Everything he ever said he wanted to do, he had these ideas of grandeur. And we thought it was kind of a joke because his ideas were so crazy and over the top. And at one point point, we finally realized that we needed to shut up because everything Mark has ever said that he wanted to do, he has done. Here's to 25 years, guys. I couldn't be more proud of you.
I love the scene they created and what happened next, and to see the evolution of it, and what they've done for Hamilton with Supercrawl has been a really nice next step.
It's always been my favorite event in the city and something that represents Hamilton well.
We were here the day before Supercrawl, and I asked for a whiskey sour, and Mark also wanted a whiskey sour. 4 hours later, Heather and I had to come pick him up from Mills Hardware because he had had too many whiskey sours.
I got this guy fucking hammered.
Yeah, the day before.
The day before Supercrawl. The night before Supercrawl.
The night before Supercrawl.
Yeah.
He was so wasted. We now have a term. Anybody that's wasted is gone full mill. Full mill. But it was the best Supercrawl we ever had.
For you, not for me.
So tonight, 25 years, we're celebrating probably the best sounding Cinematography show ever.
I was thinking about it tonight when I was playing with Tristan Psionic, which was the fucking coolest thing ever.
I got into the band in 2000, like a few months after they broke up. I was underage when I wanted to see them live, and I just saw them live for the first time ever, and I'm 35 now. Tristan Psionic still sound fucking amazing.
Go Tristan Psionic.
Congrats on still keeping at it and doing the city proud.
Happy 25th, Sonic Unyon.
Happy 25 years, Sonic Unyon.
Happy 25th anniversary, Sonic Unyon. You guys are an amazing label. Happy Sonic Unyon.
You're almost as old as I am.
All right, well, do you have a drink or no? You don't have a drink?
No, I don't have a drink. You have a t-shirt.
I have a t-shirt.
Okay, let's cheers to the 25th anniversary.
I think that's yours, actually.
That's how mine.
Yours now.
You don't have to drink it, but
Cheers.
make it look like it. Cheers. Cheers.
Beautiful.
Thanks, guys.
Amazing.